button. Oh, Adam, I will make you a recorder or a co-host, because that certainly helps.
Okay.
And I will yield the floor to you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Worshipful Master Kevin. Worshipful brethren all, on behalf of the Grand Master of Masons of the District of Columbia, Most Worshipful Brother Alan Gordon, and all the Grand Lodge officers, I bring fraternal greetings. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to speak to you all about some of my passions tonight. For those of you who have been to a presentation or two of mine, my focus is usually on what do our symbols mean in other societies. So looking more broadly at Masonic symbols through the lens of just other secret societies, the occult in general. And tonight's presentation will be something along those same lines. I've taken a couple presentations that I've done, and after talking to your Worshipful Master Kevin, decided to do a presentation which was adapted from a Hermetics lecture that I did for the Council of Kadosh at the DC Valley of Scottish Rite. Okay, so with that said, Kevin, can I just ask, do we know, will everyone watching be Masons, or since you're doing this as YouTube as well, just do it assuming that it's going to be for anyone and everyone, correct?
Yeah, so this is open for anyone and everyone. We do have Joe, who I was chatting with earlier, is one of our potential interested, an interested man in society who's reached out to us.
Okay.
So yeah, we're going to treat this as an open, untiled presentation.
Okay, thank you. And I feel like when I heard Joe's last name, it ended like abruptly. I thought it should have like an E at the end, I feel like it should have ended like knee or something.
It is, yeah. It's got an E on the end.
Right.
Joe Garone.
Okay, yeah. Like it seemed to fit. All right. Okay, well then, without further ado, I'll just say thanks again, and let's start the show. And you guys, we're a fairly small group, and even though this will be posted later, if anyone wants to ask questions in the meantime, when we're a small group, let me start sharing. One participant at a time. Okay, here we go. All right. So when we have small groups, I feel like we should all just get the most out of this. You guys made the virtual trek to come here today, and so I think that we should just have it conversational if you want. If not, I'll just go off the outline / slides that I already have. All right.
Works for me.
All right, so like Worshipful Kevin says, we're going to be doing the Hermetic Teachings of Freemasonry. As I started putting together slides for this, I realized that there's so much information here that I will go as far as I think is comfortable, and as long as we are still excited about the subject matter, I'll keep going. But regardless, I don't think that we could do justice to even just like a high level overview of this topic is so deep that you really need 2 to 3 parts of it. So, but I think that each discrete part would be exciting, and to that end, if we look at something from the Hermetic teachings, like this symbol that's in front of us, and some of us would recognize this for our non-Masonic guests, when we go through the initiatic process, and I'm going to speak generally, this isn't just Masonry, this could be the Rosicrucians, this could be the, a number of secret societies worldwide, or not so secret societies, there will be a portion in the beginning when a candidate is told to sit and reflect. In Freemasonry and other groups, that's called a reflection chamber. So in that reflection chamber, a lot of times you'll see a banner, or maybe it could be a carved piece of wood, and it says vitriol with a period between each letter. And here we have that around this hermetic plate, and it says, visit the interior of the earth, and rectificando is like to rectify or to purify or distill maybe. One will find the hidden stone, the occultum lapidum, the hidden stone. And you can even see down here, here's a little cubey stony type thing. And so as we go through tonight's lecture, hopefully you'll have a firmer grasp of why it is there is this obsession with masonry and Freemasonry, right? So the stone and hewing stones and making stones perfect, and in Freemasonry, obviously we focus more on the ashlar, but as we'll see, there can be stones of all shapes and varieties. This plate here also quite interestingly, especially for those that have had the fellowcraft degree. For those that have had the fellowcraft degree, there will be a focus here on the number 7, and you'll see that this 7 here, well, if you look at the inside of the septagram, it has the 7, what we call classical or Chaldean planets. These are the planets that in the days of yore, before there were telescopes and the like, if you were to go outside and on a clear night and look as far out as you can see, and you did that night after night, the furthest planet you could see would be this guy right here, which is Saturn. And so interestingly, Saturn they've placed with the number 1, but really if you look from the vantage point of the Earth, which is this dude right here, so this is what they call a geocentric model, and this is the Earth is in the middle. So the first planet in Freemasonry, we would call it a luminary, but the first planet that you would come to in the Chaldean order system would be the moon. And so the first planet is the moon, then Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and then finally Saturn. If you are coming from the great beyond out, you would start on your way into the Earth with Saturn. So you'll see that's one quite interesting thing that they've done here in this alchemical plate, that they've started from the outside coming in, and the very last thing before you get to the Earth, the number 7. And also, besides the fellow crafts interest with the number 7, certainly like for those of us that have read the book of Genesis, there's the creation story. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? And there were 7 days of creation. Well, there were 6 days of creation and a day of rest. So we see an interesting number 7 there. Talking about the Hermetic Teachings of Masonry, it's not giving away any of our secrets to say that we have a G on our buildings and our ring, which just happens to be the 7th letter of the alphabet, and so on and so forth. As we go through some of these slides, I'm hoping that some of this will start to make sense a bit more. So as we see here, we have this birdie-looking guy on a skull at the beginning, number 1. Later, he's picking the face off of it, I think. And then his buddies come in and they kind of share in the feasting of the face type of thing. And then they're all excited. Then, his girlfriend comes and so on and so forth. And then weirdly at the end, there's this like kid that's born of the whole thing. This is going to be a alchemical process, which is described in these, again, 7 spheres. For the Kabbalists, they'll recognize those as Sephiroth. For those more familiar with the Eastern tradition, they'll recognize them as chakras, but they're all describing an alchemical process which we have hidden or occulted or camouflaged in the degrees of Freemasonry. And it'll be my argument tonight that also in the Hermetic teachings. And so lastly, in Masonry, we like the sun, the moon, and the master of the lodge. Here it's called anima, spiritus, and corpus, which is more or less the mind, soul, and body type of thing, but far richer meanings. And then finally, lighted torch or torch of illumination or Illuminati. You have this kind of kingly looking dude with a solar disc around his head, and he's holding his staff and kind of riding a great beast, another beast on fire, birds. This chick's kind of riding a little sea monster thing. So, all right, what does it all mean? As we go through these slides, it's my hope today that you will understand a bit more of what this alchemical and hermetic slide is teaching the initiates, where that might be found in Freemasonry. And with it, I'm hoping it'll make your Masonic experience a bit richer. And so, all right, so let's see with that, let's get going. All right, so Albert Pike said that he who desires to attain the great understanding of the grand word, and remember, word is the logos, right, from the book of John. And so he who desires to attain the understanding of the great word and the possession of the great secret ought carefully to read the Hermetic philosophers. And so here's Pike early on, already giving us a hint that there's a connection between the teachings of Freemasonry and Hermes. We find for the Kabbalists, they'll see that Pike used the word understanding here, which is associated with the Kabbalistic tree of life. Again, for those that are interested more in Christian mysticism, the grand word has to do with, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God in the beginning of the book of John, and so on and so forth. And certainly, if we have any members of the Ordo Templi Orientalis, they'll be interested that Pike put that on page 777 for those who are fans of Crowley. All right, so to have our discussion tonight, first thing I'm going to do is, I don't want this to be like some touchy-feely, like some of these presentations that I do on Kabbalah and alchemy, that they're not as tangible as something as this lecture. So what I'd like to do is actually break down some of the words of the lecture. Everything will be open source. There's nothing that I will violate any of my obligations that I have taken. So, but we'll go through some of the open source text, and we'll look at some of the ritual and why the, this model that when I was a youngster getting out of grad school, and I went and I worked in DC for the first time for a think tank that did conflict analysis, and I came across a conflict model developed by the Soviet Union, and it was just so interesting the way that it decided whether or not, tribes were going to be able to have a détente or like an easing of tensions, and it used this linguistics model. Anyway, later I put the some words of Freemasonry in there to see what would happen. And so tonight we're going to see what happens by putting some words in like a super cool conflict model and seeing what comes out the other end. So we're going to do that first, and then with that, it's not going to be so much of a qualitative analysis. It'll be a quantitative analysis, but not nerdy or boring, hopefully. This is going to be just a quick way to show you that you can trace words' origins, and by doing that, we're going to be able to see how close the Hermetic teachings are to the Masonic ones. I think we'll be able to certainly get into the comparing of the mythologies of the Hermetic wisdom and those of Masonic teachings. And then finally, if there is enough time, I figure I can just give you a high level intro into what I'm calling applied astrology. And because the teachings of Hermes are going to be, multifaceted, one of them being astrology. So, all right. So with that, let's get going. All right, so start off, we had this in Babylon, from which we get this Babel, right? Babel on. From in Babylon, we had this Temple of Nimrod, which was biblically it was after the flood, and Nimrod says, we got to build this big old temple that goes way up high. So if, God ever tries to flood us out again, we'll all survive it. And so, but interestingly to a Mason, if you look at these, these guys here, like he's kind of wearing the skirt looking thing, which is also like a Masonic apron. And what's he doing? He's huge, like probably some guys over here where the smoke is, they've cut these rocks out of the ground, and then these guys are now like fine tuning them, right? Royal Arch Masons will know about this, and so they're, chiseling them down. They are removing the superfluities, right, of these ashlars and perfecting them for the builder's use. So you see something kind of Masonic here. You're not quite sure. Looking closer at the story of Babel, you see that it was actually all these Masons are coming here from the Middle and Near East in order to help in the creation of this stupendous edifice that, if you didn't know any better, sounds a heck of a lot like King Solomon's temple. And so they are, and they're building this stupendous edifice in that, in case there's a flood again, they'll all be saved, like I said. So the important thing for the lecture right now, though, is that up to this point in the biblical history, there is one language spoken on the face of the earth. And so the Elohim, which I get into in a different presentation, but the Elohim, they look down and they're like, oh man, look at these guys, their arrogance, their hubris. Like, if we want to kill them, we do not need to flood them out. And I'm using we because that's the pronoun that's used in the Old Testament, the Elohim. And so anyway, so the Elohim are like, man, what's going on here? These guys are, arrogant and they think that, like, all we have is floods if we want to wipe people out. So anyway, in order to make it so the people can't build this edifice anymore, one of the things that the Elohim does is quote unquote confounds man's language, and confound means to confuse. In other words, coming into this story, one language spoken on the whole of the earth. Coming out of this story, that God magically changes everybody into speaking all these different languages. So you can imagine it's from here that you get, all of your different dialects that are spoken in Asia, and then Africa, and you name it. So, and so, yeah. So anyway, so up till now, everybody speaks one language, and it's magically changed to where there's, all the languages that we had in this part of our history, and then over time they morphed even more. And so to this day, if you can't understand someone's speech, we call somebody a babbling idiot or a babbling fool, and that comes from Babel, because the word Babel is associated with confusion. And so in 1730, Pritchard said it this way: for the building of the Tower of Babel, the art and mystery of masonry was first introduced, and from thence handed down by Euclid, a worthy and excellent mathematician of the Egyptians. And he communicated it to Hiram, the master mason concerned in the building of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. So here we already see Pritchard making a connection between the Tower of Babel, which, like I said, sounds a lot like the Tower of, or the Temple of King Solomon. The kind of this Euclidean idea, and also the Egyptians, and then finally with Masonry. And so we'll see why those connections here shortly. In the book of Genesis, it was spelled out like this: the Lord said, behold, the people as one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Let us go down there and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So again, interestingly, for that I get into in lectures on Kabbalah, why we use the pronoun us or we when it comes to deity. But again, for tonight's purposes, just super interesting that up to the story of Babel, they speak one language. After Babel, lots of languages. So if you're a theologian, this has got to sound pretty cool, because it's almost like if you could trace words back through the study of linguistics, maybe you can prove that this this narrative of the Old Testament is true. And indeed, K.J. Dersma in 2002 in the Journal of Creation wrote the Tower of Babel account affirmed by linguistics. And Dersma wrote, in the conventional view of language development, it developed from a single proto-language, or sometimes we call that a golden language. And again, those who are Freemasons think back to how in our degrees, there's discussions about not being able to understand other people's speech, right? So think about back to your fellowcraft degree. So in the conventional view of language development, language developed from a single proto-language and diverged into different languages as time progressed. In the biblical model, man was created with language and was supernaturally changed at Babel. All right. And keep the, I won't get into this, but I told you it came from a Soviet model, the A&M, or the Alice of the Peoples of the World. This is the model. But what it looks like is this. It looks like a family tree. Kevin has, 3 kids, and Kevin's daughter has 4 kids, and one of those kids has 4 kids. It's a family tree. Now imagine, and it's got a fancy name, ethno-linguistic fractionalization, but it's really, really simple. But social scientists like to make things sound confusing so they can get paid big bucks. But really, it's as simple as this. Imagine this is Latin. Latin over space and time changed into French, Spanish, and Portuguese, right? So super simple. And so we call that a mother language and daughter languages. Well, that daughter French over time became a mother as well, just as one of Kevin's daughters might over time. And then we have that daughter giving, or that mother now giving away, or giving birth to 4 new daughter languages. And so now French gives birth to, the stuff they speak in France, that I don't know what it is called, they speak in Quebec, the Quebecois, that stuff they speak in Quebec maybe, or did I already say Quebec, Belgium, and then maybe some of that West African, the cool languages over there that they speak in Cote d'Ivoire and Cameroon and stuff. And then within those countries, maybe inside like Cameroon, you have like town by town where they have local dialects called patois, right? And those patois, are basically, Cameroonian French, but they have cool ways of saying like what's up, or that you wouldn't see, like if you're in like in Spanish. When I was in the Dominican Republic, like they for our Spanish speakers, normally you say how are you doing, ¿Cómo estás, or something, but in like the Dominican Republic, they just say like ¿Qué lo que?, which is like what the what, so. And that's how it gets in these little towns, is they just have these fun little regional dialects that if you could speak French from France and you're going to get 80% of the words, but you ain't getting all of them, that's for sure. And so this is what it looks like. We're not going to get into this, but bottom line is that you could see that the languages that we're concerned with in Freemasonry, Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, things like that, you can see that they're very similar words. I mean, like a word like peace in Arabic, salam, right, is very similar. Oh, where's my pointer? So Arabic, peace, salam, is almost identical to the Hebrew shalom, right? And so you can see that because these languages are close together on the tree, so is the words. Now, if you come all the way over here to what they're speaking over in Papua New Guinea or something, I guarantee peace is not going to be the same word. You're not going to be able to identify it. And so that's the only thing to recognize, is that when languages are close to each other on this tree, they're very similar in the real world. And so, and let me just show you, and that was the last kind of technical thing. And then, but let's look at it in the real world, because like I said, it's not really that complex. And so words in time and space. So if you look at the word for Jesus, Yeshua in the Bible, that's the way that they're saying it over here. I should have looked here. Oh yeah, my bad eyes. Israel's right here. So you can see in Hebrew, Israel is, they say Yeshua. So in, but Greek and Latin, you can see are almost the same idea, but the ending's a little different, and so is the beginning. The Y, the Y sound, which is Yud in Hebrew, is replaced with an IE or a JE, but it's not that different. And you can see that it's because Israel is right across the Mediterranean from Greece and Italy, where they're where we find these two versions. My name, Adam, right? So Adam from Israel, from Hebrew, isn't that different than Adam in the Latin, but also if you see like Saddam, right? Saddam, like in Iraq, is even more similar. You know, all they've added is this S in the beginning of it, and it's because these countries are so close together. Now, look at a word like Jehovah from the Bible. Jehovah is nearly identical between the Hebrew and the Latin, between Israel and Italy, right? Because again, right across the Mediterranean. So if there's dudes like, you know, doing trade across the water, they're going to have similar words. But by the time you get down to the eastern horn of Egypt, you know, Jah Rastafari over to Ethiopia, they've dropped the whole ending of it, and so you get the beginning, the Jah of Jehovah, but you've lost the whole ending, and that's how this linguistics model works. And in the words of this linguist Steve Pinker, he says, a word is an arbitrary symbol, a connection between signs and an idea shared by members of a community. The word duck, for example, it's not like a hieroglyph, right? It doesn't look like a duck or walk like a duck or quack, but we can use it to convey the idea of a duck because we've all formed the connection between the sounds that you hear when it comes into your ear, the consonants, and the picture of a duck in your head. And you'll see that, so to get rid of, so your brain actually hears these consonants. And this is why biblical Hebrew doesn't use vowels. And so, long story short, to use this model, you just get rid of vowels and you're left with these two consonants, just like the Old Testament, and the D sound and the K sound, which is what your ear hears. And with that, we make the association with a duck. So Adam, what does this have to do with the price of tea in China? Well, if we apply that to the name Hiram, and I guess I should have said early on for those that are non-Masons here, that in Freemasonry, we learn kind of a little backstory of the Old Testament, and it has to do with the creation of the Temple of King Solomon and who the architect of that stupendous edifice was. And it was a guy named Hiram Abiff, who was a widow's son. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much all there is to say about it. So when we, but there's two Hirams in the Masonic ritual that you, again, it's all open source. I'm not giving away any of our secrets to tell you that. So, but if you're interested, or when we apply that model to Hiram, then we would remove the vowels and we're left with the H, R, and the M. Or if you get rid of the suffix like we did with Jehovah and wound up with Jah, you can get rid of the suffix too, but really all we need is this. So to get rid of the vowels, we're left with H, R, and M. So when you swap out some vowels, which you can do, and here's Tim Hogan in his Alchemical Keys book, he reminds us when you take the letters that spell Hiram in Hebrew and emphasize a different set of vowels, since Hebrew has no vowels, it can be pronounced Hermes, which is the Greek Hermes. And since we're talking about Hermes tonight, that seemed very relevant. All right. So, sorry, give me 1 second here my throat's getting dry. All right. So you guys are that are non-Masons, you'll have to take me at my word. This will be, especially cool for people that have been in Freemasonry for a moment. But one of the key aspects which we'll see in Freemasonry is the idea that that which is above is like that which is below. That which is within is like that which is without. And so you'll see that one of the interesting things right off the bat when we look at Hermes, and this is, by the way, Hermes Trismegistus, lots of pronunciations. I'm still not sure which one's right. I'll go with Hermes Trismegistus tonight. Hermes, which means thrice great or 3 times great. But Hermes was also, actually, I should tell you first, Hermes, the Greek god Hermes, messenger god, which is why he's got these dope little kind of Nike wings on his shoes here and on his hat, because he's the messenger of the gods. And I want to say that, actually, now that I think of it, one of the it wasn't FedEx, but it was one of the old school companies that did deliveries of packages. FTD, yeah, I want to say FTD used actually the symbol of Mercury's. And so, because what's he doing? He's carrying messages. That's what he did. He carried messages for Zeus. But in Rome, in the Roman pantheon, Mercury did that for Jupiter. In the Egyptian pantheon, Thoth did that, right? He was the scribe of the gods, and he was, known for arithmetic and writing and many other things.
I can cut in real quick, Adam. You
Please,
were correct.
please.
It was FTD.
Okay.
Flowers Trans World Delivery. Flower delivery service. Nicely done.
But I don't know. Flowers didn't really. I was hoping that it was like a UPS, because that was literally carrying messages. But I guess the flowers are bringing some sort of like a message of love. I don't know. I'd have to play with that. But
you got it right, and that's all that counts.
Okay. All right. So I got some street cred now. All right.
Absolutely.
Okay. And also, by the way, Mercury was the god of commerce. And so if you think about just one of these snakes intertwined around the pole, that is our dollar sign. And that's no coincidence. This is also the symbol of the American Medical Association, which was a mistake. That was actually, if I'm not mistaken, again, I believe that was the conflation of an Army medical doctor. I want to say his rank was a colonel, maybe a captain. And so, but one of these snakes around a pole was associated with the medical field. 2 of them was not. It was Mercury, and it was commerce, and it was other things that we associate with Mercury. But this Army officer, if you believe the story, conflated the 2, and that's why we use this staff of Hermes for the Medical Association, or what we call the caduceus.
Another interesting point, Adam, with Mercury is, you're talking about commerce. I mean, that's the iconic symbol of New York City.
Oh, right.
That was founded on commerce, and that's a central theme. You'll see Mercury throughout the city on different edifices and towers and whatnot.
That's right. I did a secret walking tour of the Champs-Elysees, I don't know, a little over a year ago, for a bunch of Masons. And man, I tell you what, walk down from the Great Arch through the Arc de Triomphe all the way down to, I'm telling you, when you walk down the Champs-Elysees, man, you would not believe they have Mercury or some kind of Mercurian symbol all the way down there, especially when you get to the Place de Concorde, which on one side has their big legislature, on the other side, the Biblioteca, which was all designed by Napoleon, and everywhere around there is Hermetic. And even I was there with my buddies from the Scottish Rite, and like even like we went to go pick up some ties or something for our SGIG, and it was at a place called Hermes, which is Hermes is just like a fancy French way of saying Hermes, and it's spelled the same way except for they put a French little accent grave over the second E. So yeah, there I agree. The main cities are obsessed with Mercury, and that's Rome, that's DC, and that is Paris and others. But I mean, yeah. And so anyway, so but to the Masons, you know, we'll recognize that we have what we call the three principal officers of the Masonic Lodge, and they're denoted under the epithets wisdom, strength, and beauty. So already we see here's Thoth here, kind of like representing a phase of the sun. Is that the sun rising in the east to open and adorn the day, my free Masonic brothers? Probably. And what's his title? Wisdom, right? And so yeah. Anyway, I mean, just super interesting stuff that you see. And again, if we had more time, we would dig a lot deeper. But I'll just say that, look here. So here is the caduceus again, right? Here is that head. Remember we saw in the beginning that bird pecking the skin off the face of a head. So so if you're in the know, if you're an initiate, and you're into these societies, and I know we have a brother that might be interested in, you know, caveat emptor, buyer beware. Like, you know, when you start going down these rabbit holes, this is what it's all about. You know, you will learn to reinterpret all the symbols around you, or you can't go into a 7-Eleven. You know, why is 7-Eleven called 7-Eleven, right? If you don't know, that's the proportions of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Like, if you don't know why McDonald's has that sign, or you know, Shell gas or any of that. So this is what we're teaching here, how to understand those symbols that are hidden in plain sight. And so there's a reason why there's a bunch of sticks that are bundled with vines or twine around them. Look at the Lincoln Memorial. Look at the back of the dime. I mean, if you don't understand these things. So just to say that we're not going to get into every aspect of this based on time, but I'll just say that this is very rich and replete with symbolism. But since we're talking about Freemasonry tonight, and we're concerned with that, so here is what we call the Corpus Hermeticum, which literally means the body of Hiram. If we take Tim Hogan's word that Hermes and Hiram are the same word, because they are. I speak Hebrew, and when you in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, when we say that Hiram is the correct pronunciation of that name, it's not. We're guessing it. And any theologian or rabbi or rabbinic scholar that tells you that that's the pronunciation isn't being straight with you. They're not being on the level. They're not plain dealing or on the square. They are giving an interpretation, what we believe might be the pronunciation, but like Tim said, it could just as easily be pronounced Hermes. There is no vowels in biblical Hebrew when we read the Old Testament, and so any pronunciation that includes the vowels is a guess. And so that's important to know. So to think when and if you don't take anything else away from that, that's an important thing to take tonight, is that Hiram is very, it is just a guess that that's how we pronounce his name, but Hermes is just as likely. And so anyway, long story short, the Corpus Hermeticum is what we call the body of research or the body of wisdom that come from Hermes. And by the way, people used to write under the name Hermes. I'll butcher it, but I think they call it a pseudepigraphia, if I'm not mistaken. So, and they did that for Hermes and lots of others over history. And in the ancient world, it would have been considered in the initiatic circles egotistical and antithetical to write under your own name. So for Adam Goldman to write a book under my name, it was defeating the purpose of me providing information for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. It would be me trying to show off. And therefore, anything that I wrote as a member of an initiatic society, I would just attribute to this dude Hermes. And that would be how I get information out of the public. But where might we see the Freemasonry? Just in something like the Emerald Tablet. And so there's a circle. And so again, not giving away any secrets to say that if you look at a Masonic ring or anything that you find a square and compasses. Well, what do you get when you put a point in the middle and you draw a circle with your compasses, right? So here's your compasses, and below the compasses is a square, right? So these Hermetic teachings are all hidden here. So, and then it's showing you that it's a fractal. It's starting it over and over again. So square, right? Or compasses, right? Square and compasses, right? It's showing you that it essentially is showing you a bit about the 47th problem of Euclid. Okay. Well, what are these that might interest a Freemason? Well, sulfur, salt, and mercury. Well, sulfur is also associated with oil, salt with corn, mercury with wine. So there's your corn, wine, and oil. Again, if you're a Mason, you know that whenever we've done a cornerstone laying where we bring corn, wine, and oil. Now, you ask yourself, why is salt associated with corn? Well, I think it has to do, if you look at it closely, they had a resemblance to corn kernels, but more than that, I think that once upon a time, the word corn was a verb, not a noun. So we use corn and we conflate it with maize. But you think about something like corned beef. Corned beef is what? Salted beef. But to corn it was to make it, dry and draw out some of the moisture and make it so for those of you that had to, travel the long distance between Europe and the Holy Land or something, you had some food that you could, survive on in your pack that wouldn't go rancid on the way. So anyway, so corn, wine, and oil also hidden within the body of Hiram, or the Corpus Hermeticum. So as we start, how am I doing on time real quick? Let me just make sure. All right. We're about 30 minutes in. You guys tell me, Kevin, you speak for the group. You're the big boss here. So when you guys get sick of me, just let me know and we'll just call it a day.
I'm still good here. How about everybody else? I see a thumbs up from Al. Thumbs up from Joe.
Doing it.
All right.
All right, let's keep going.
All right, we'll keep going. Okay. So when we look at what we call the 7 Hermetic principles, which you can find in a series of books like the Kabbalion, which I'm holding up right now, the 7 principles is that the universe is mental, is the first. And so in other words, it's a very Gnostic philosophy. Everything is happening more or less within the mind of the creator. And I'll tell you something else. It's very much like the Matrix when you think about this first Hermetic principle. The second is the law of correspondence, which I've already alluded to. That which is above is like that which is below. In the what we call the Pater Noster, or the Lord's Prayer, we say, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, on earth as it is in heaven, right? On earth as below, as it is in heaven, as it is above. So even hidden in the Pater Noster, the Lord's Prayer, is this Hermetic axiom. the law of vibration, that, you know, everything is in a perpetual motion, whether or not you notice it or whether or not you are able to even perceive it. So even the molecules of your windows, for example, I know if you look at some of these great cathedrals, these really ancient Gothic cathedrals in Europe, you'll see that they bow in the middle because they are flowing, believe it or not, like water does, just very slowly. And so it takes, you know, since the Renaissance era for them to, like, you know, have flowed downward this, you know, I don't know, maybe a few millimeters, but if you look at them closely, these old windows in the abbeys of Europe, you'll see that they are flowing. So everything is in constant movement or motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, right? So, I mean, you got physics in here. So everything exists in opposites. So that you can't have night without day. You can't have good without bad. You can't have, you know, so on and so forth. So, you know, same types of thing, you know, rhythm, you know, this becomes very, important later to the Pythagoreans or the Pythagoreans. I'm like always torn that however I pronounce it, my buddy Jamie is gonna hit me on the knuckles with a ruler because I don't pronounce right. But I like Pythagoreans, but I think Pythagoreans is. But you'll see that it's music, it's tension and repose. It is also astrology, and but it's waves, right? And so everything moves in waves. Again, everything that has an action has an equal and opposite reaction, is very similar to this cause and effect, although this one is discrete, and that everything exists in two genders, masculine and feminine, and those aren't sexual. I mean, the Kabbalists that are listening to this, or those of the Eastern traditions, will have meditated on this a lot more, but there's no short way of, or no brief way of saying that. So I am not even going to try. Trismegistus.
So one question, Adam,
Please,
real quick,
please.
when you were talking about the previous slide on gender. So is this more, this is totally fitting with the Rebus drawing from what, Valentinus? The Hermetic drawing where you had half male, half female.
Absolutely.
And then the sun representing the male and the moon representing the feminine, and et cetera.
That's right. And how do we say the sun in Latin? The soul, S-O-L, right? And the moon is mon, from where we get the word month and menstrual and Monday, the moon day, and all these things, right? So and in Spanish is E, in French is A. So if we think about combining the feminine and the masculine, which I get into other lectures, the Hermes and the Aphrodite, when we bring them together, we get the hermaphrodite, the Hermeaphrodite.
Yes.
When we bring in the masculine and feminine, the sun and the moon, the soul and the mon, we get the Soleiman, the Suleiman, or the Solomon, right? So King Solomon represents this perfected idea of male and female.
Excellent. That's good insight.
Yeah. And I have other presentations where I get into that. I don't think I touch on that here, though. So Trismegistus, thrice great. And why was he thrice great? Because he was the greatest king, the greatest philosopher, and the greatest priest. And so for Masons, again, think about, you know, the associations there with Hiram Abiff, Hiram King of Tyre, and King Solomon, right? So you see like a lot baked into this that, you know, it's not going to be apples to apples, but the same, as Joe Campbell would say, archetypes, or Carl Jung, are present in the Masonic degrees. Now, another thing about Hermes, he was the father of alchemy, the father of astrology, and the father of theurgy, or magic. And so again, I already touched on the first plate, the alchemy hidden in that birds eating faces stuff. I'm going to get more into the astrology later. And magic is, once you understand all of this, and I mean, when you recognize is a better word, not understand. When you recognize that alchemy and astrology are ever present in the New Testament, the Old Testament, Masonic degrees, then we start to really understand what the Book of John is saying was in the beginning was the word, because the word is magic, or as we say, abracadabra, which means I create as I speak. And so, but interestingly, that Hermes was the father of alchemy, astrology, and theurgy, because in Hebrew, the word father is Abba, right? Mother is Ima, father is Abba. And so it's interesting that at least one researcher says that the suffix Abi means without a father. So Abba with a father, Abba without a father. And so when we think about Hiram Abif, which is the root, is Hiram without a father or a widow's son. So that's really interesting, especially when you look at the connections to other widows' sons, dudes like Horus, whose dad's Osiris was slain by Set, and that also is associated with the Masonic pillar officers, because the sun rising in the east, open and adorn the day, the sun comes up over the horizon from the word Horus, right? And the sun sets in the west. The sun set was the evil uncle of Horus that killed his dad, Osiris. So all this stuff is built into here. And if this was a Kabbalist lecture, I would get more into the symbology of what this curved arm is, because this is the letter Kaf in Hebrew, so is this. But anyway, but long story short, he's making a word in Hebrew called kokab, which means star or planet. So he's telling you, hey, I'm the planet Mercury, and I'm traveling, and this is probably my dad, the Zeus, or the great planet Jupiter. But you'll see, like, just similarities from what we've already seen, the caduceus and the winged helmet, but interestingly, he's wearing this kind of red Martian robe, because red is the color of Mars, among others. So when we keep looking at the Hermetic teachings of Masonry and where there might be alignment, again, so those 7 principles look a heck of a lot like the 7 liberal arts and sciences. In Hermetic alchemy, instead, they talk about, they have a metaphor of turning a useless, or not useless, that's not a good word, I don't know, there's probably a fancier way of saying it, but a not valuable metal like lead, right? And turning it into something valuable like gold. And so they turn lead to gold, and we take a rough ashlar, which is also not worth anything. It's just, the stone you find on the side of the road. And then by putting man's ingenuity and blood, sweat, and tears into it, we come up with a perfect ashlar. So you can see that the ideas of Hermetic alchemy are also hidden in our ashlar, right? And so, and then in Christianity, they take something like water, which is just available to everyone, but turn it into something that's valuable, because, they've turned water to wine. So everyone can go to the well and get some water, but if you want some wine, you got to pay for it. And then finally, if we look at our linguistics model from the beginning of the lecture, the volume of the sacred law of the Hermetic teachings, again, if you look, this is the Kybalion, just one of many, many books that you can find in the Corpus Hermeticum. The word Kybalion has the same consonants, K, B, and L, or Kaf, Bet, Lamed in Hebrew, as Kabbalah. And the word kabel, right, it means to receive. And once upon a time, the Masonic degrees were only received mouth to ear, much like Kabbalah was. Now they just write it down, which, good and bad, I can talk about it all, because I don't have to, worry about giving away any secrets, because I can just point to to Pritchard in the 1700s or Pike in the 1800s and show you where we got it from, and then discuss it, as long as it's not me being the one to reveal it. So All right. So, and by the way, before we leave this, and let me just check time one more time because I think we're getting close. So we're about at the 45-minute mark. I don't want to take too much longer, so we'll tie up the idea after this, and then if you all want to have me back, then we can get deeper into the applied astrology. I didn't think we'd get there. But just interestingly that in another mystery school from ancient Greece that my buddy Joe Martinez gets more into, the Eleusinian mysteries. In the Eleusinian mysteries, they were concerned with this story of this mother goddess called Persephone, and she's in charge of all the seasons. And so this is Persephone. Let me start there. Persephone is stolen away by the devil or Hades and taken into the underworld because he looks up and just sees this like hottie and she's plucking flowers or something. He's like, man, I want her with me. And takes her down to the underworld, and her mother gets so depressed that she's supposed to be in charge of the seasons changing. And she's like, man, all I can think about is my daughter. I don't care about these seasons. And the whole world almost dies. And so Zeus has to intervene and sends the one guy that, like Christ, can go into the underworld and back up at will. He was called a psychopomp, and that's Hermes. And so again, the messenger of the gods. And in Freemasonry, this is, and I get into this in other lectures, this is one of our lodge officers. And you can think about one of our lodge officers, two of them really, are responsible for carrying messages from the worshipful master, to carry orders from the worshipful master in the east to the senior warden in the west or elsewhere about the lodge, right? So like we have messenger carriers in Freemasonry. That's what Hermes' job is. Yes, yeah, we have those two. All right, Pike said, we know that the symbolism of Freemasonry were introduced into it by the Hermetic philosophers of England. So, and I'll just end probably very close to here. Again, just focusing on one thing: as above, so below. You know, in the tarot, you'll see this in the card that represents Mercury. You can see the magician pointing up and pointing down. This Italian dude did this sculpture that horrified everyone when they showed a half-naked George Washington becoming essentially God form apotheosis. And it's not the only one, but what's he doing? Pointing up and pointing down. This Freemason is saying, as above, so below, on earth as it is in heaven. And then you'll see also like 1 foot on the stone, the ashlar, right, that we've already discussed, and one off. And then the classical depiction of Baphomet has this Mercurian caduceus, and then these big boobs because he's lunar, but also this phallic rod because he's also solar. The Aphrodite, or wait, Hermaphrodite, the Hermaphrodite, or the Soleiman, the Solomon. So and don't worry, it's not evil. It's just misunderstanding of the role of Capricorn in the zodiac. This is just the goat Capricorn.
This statue of Washington was so controversial, they hid it somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
They kind of tucked it away. But because it is very godlike and it is pointing to that, as above, so below type of thing. But just like the apotheosis, of the dome, they deified him.
That's right. And it wasn't long before, Eliphas Levi, I can't remember what year this came out. I'm going to say, yeah, I'm not even going to guess because if I get it wrong, I'm going to feel bad and Homan's going to fact check me. But we'll just say that, but this came out before this, and when people looked and saw that these the statue of Washington mirrored that of Baphomet, then that really had the conspirators. But that's the thing; it's like zeitgeist is people that don't understand the deeper meaning of our symbols and don't do meditations and don't try and perfect themselves. they're easily misled by people that have a half of an understanding of these things. In other words, they, maybe have a very superficial understanding of the story of Christianity, and therefore they can conflate it with Dionysus and Mithras and so on and so forth, like they do. But yeah, those are charlatans. They don't understand the deep hidden Hermetic wisdom that has been hidden in the New Testament, the Old Testament, and Masonic ritual. So anyway, and so, like I said, I'm going to end. I'm not going to get into applied astrology. If you guys found this interesting, I think at another time we can pick up here, because I think it gets really interesting to then start looking at, something, if we already said that which is above is like that which is below, well, then you think about when you come into a lodge room, and again, not giving away any secrets, is you see above one of the pillars a globe that represents the earth, and you see a globe that represents the heavens, on earth as it is in heaven, as above as it is below, so type of thing. So, but we won't get into that today, so I'm going to just end with Manly Hall in Secret Teachings said that Hermes was the author of the Masonic initiatory rituals, and nearly all of the Masonic symbols are Hermetic in character. I mean, mic drop, right? I mean, Manly Hall just, puts it on Front Street. And so with that, Worshipful Master Kevin, I will hand it back to you. But hopefully, I'll just say that hopefully when you look at something which is, it's, I think most of us would see so much noise in here when we're not initiates, and we wouldn't really give this its due diligence. And now hopefully you can look at it and see that it's trying to tell you a story from a time when most people were illiterate but not uneducated. And so this is just telling a story much in the same way if you went to a church from the time of the Templars, pre 1300, and you would see that on the face of the church, it was telling you a lot of these stories in a hieroglyphic form. So with that, I will stop sharing and hand it back to you, Worshipful Master.
Thank you very much, Adam. And I guess that'd be the first and last image we saw, right? It almost reminds me a little bit of, in a way, of some of the older tracing boards, right? Like there's so much imagery and so much meaning behind what's on those things that, to parse it in, one sitting is impossible, 10 sittings still is impossible. You have to keep seeing them, or, seeing our degrees over and over and over again. And you keep picking stuff up, the more and more you see them, right? So yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Adam? I see Al. You answered. Looks like you answered Corey's or Caleb's message question there about what was on the Baphomet's arms.
Yeah, and in an alchemical phrase. Again, I'll just add to what Al said, is that the teachings of Masonry, we make a distinction between operative and speculative Masons. There are so those that actually go out and build cathedrals in the ancient world, and then there are those of us that just use those tools symbolically in order to perfect ourselves, because our body is a temple, right, as they like to say. The same can be said for alchemy. So there are speculative and operative alchemists. And so there are alchemists that are literally trying to turn lead to gold. And then there are those that it's completely symbolic, and turning lead to gold is a spiritual attainment goal, and those that do both. So anyway, I'll just add on to that.
Well, it's just, it's a play in opposites, right? Like separate and join together. Gold and lead. You have an expensive metal, a relatively cheap metal, right? The black and white of the yin and yang. The sacred feminine and the sacred masculine. It's, a contrast and opposites, everything balancing itself out. Joe, if you do join us, and take on this journey, it's something you'll find out. Kind of like I said, a life of balance, and I'll just leave it at that. I think that's a.
Well, I'm very interested. And this is
Good.
definitely intriguing, but I could tell there's so much I am clueless on. So
Kevin,
There's a lot to learn, and it takes a long time to get there. Sorry, Fred, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
yeah, I studied the Kabbalion before I ever came to Masonry a long time ago. Do you have any class that just study the Kabbalion and go through that Hermetic, those Hermetic teachings?
I do actually. It's it's one of these ones that is like many of these groups within Masonry. Masonry is a way to get your foot in the door and to say that I will adhere to certain principles, and then once you have agreed to adhere to those principles, then there are other groups that will invite you in. And so I will note your interest, but there are, several. I would suggest that if you, the weird thing with these backgrounds, it always does that, but look at these Collectiana Hermeticas if you're interested. These are wonderful books that are edited and they were from William Westcott, and they're put out by the Golden Dawn Research Trust. And so very, very interesting works if you are interested in either the Golden Dawn or Rosicrucianism in general. But yes, there are groups that discuss all sorts of aspects. And by the way, in the Hermetic teachings, I'll tell you what, you want to find something interesting, Fred, look at this one. I mean, this is, the Emerald Tablet of Thoth is like a fascinating, and it's, by the way, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. So if you haven't looked at this, I recommend. This is like a real eye-opener.
Well, if you or Kevin could send those just in an email so we can look them up, that'd be great.
Yeah, Fred, I will, like I said, this is being recorded, so I'll make sure. What I'll do is I'll get those books in the description of the video, but I'll also email them out to the lodge and everybody who's on here. Oh, and Adam, perfect, thank you. Dropping it right in the chat for us. Even better.
Yeah, another note on interest in the Kabbalion, and I'm sure Adam's familiar with Mitch Horowitz. Mitch has several different YouTube videos on that.
Yeah.
And our one visitor tonight, Joe, is that correct?
yep, I'm me. Yeah, that's me.
Oh, okay, Joe. So new to this, you're diving in on an esoteric aspect that a lot of Masons have no idea it even exists. Yeah, so you're kind of coming at it from the bottom going up, which is fine. But Masonry has many layers, and some people choose to just look on the outside layers, and some people dive deep. And Adam's one of those guys that dives deep, as probably most of us on here.
Well, I like to look at it like this. When I was a youngster, I worked for this Italian restaurant, and people that came in, they usually looked at the wine list and they took whatever was offered there. But the real like old school Italians, they came in and they're like, we don't need this. They're like, where is the limoncello? Where is the this stuff? And it's like, we're not even supposed to be selling that stuff. The good stuff they don't actually put on the menu, and that is see also Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Freemasonry, everything. So the good stuff isn't on the menu. You have to recognize that because X, there is Y and Z. And so if you're somebody that's actually passionate about whichever book you're into, whether it's the Masonic Ritual, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the Torah, the New Testament, it doesn't matter. If you are somebody, for example, the New Testament, that you run out of answers because of what you're interested in, well, eventually your Orthodox priests might hand you the apocryphal text and say, sounds like you need to start looking at the Apocrypha because this will answer a bit more, and you're not satiated by the conventional wisdom. And so that's the beauty of these. It's, in Freemasonry, we describe it, and the Bible, it says, when, we'll just say in the occult, probably more appropriate to say, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. In Freemasonry, they might say, knock and it shall be opened unto you. But it's the same idea as that, when I was a youngster like Al, and I read the Kabbalion the first time, it meant little to nothing. It was like kind of cool, and it was when I years later reread it, maybe it meant a little bit more. The words on the page never changed. I changed, and so the words on the page had a deeper and more profound meaning. When I wrote this lecture initially in a different form for our Scottish Rite Valley, and I had been a student of alchemy and Kabbalah and a few more things, then, it started, really showing me the beauty of the Kabbalion. And so in the ancient Egyptian kind of language, we would say that the goddess Isis removed her veil, right? We were starting to see, you can imagine if there's like 30 veils in front of your face, you can't see anything, but you remove one veil, you remove another, and things start to come into focus. And so as we learn these books that, have so many levels to them, because they're written by people that have dedicated their lives to obscuring these knowledge only for the learned, or not for the learned, but for those that are on a path. How about we'll say that, those that are on a path. And so I'm a firm believer that we eventually find our path. If you believe in past lives or not, when you find yourself here among us listening to something like this, we've been here all along. It's like you're the one that's changing and sought us out now. And over time, anyway, go ahead. Sorry, Caleb.
No, I was just,
yeah.
I've been a terrible Mason for several years. So haven't seen Lodge, and this is probably the first education I've bothered to show up for, and I'm glad I did. And I just, thank you for taking the time to do it. It's great.
Thank you, Caleb.
It's inspired me to maybe be a little more active, but you know how life is, it's hard.
Well, and don't think of it just like that. It's kind of like if you're like me, like a naturopath, like for over 2.5 years, I was a vegan. And that's just what I needed at this time. I was going through a breakup, and I needed to do the exact opposite of what I had been doing, which was I was on a low carb diet, eating all protein. And I needed a break after being super depressed after some girl dumped me. And one of my brothers said, let's try something completely different, right? And now for something completely different. And so let's do these 3 things. And I listened and I did them. And but then over these, recently, my body was saying, okay, well, you did that. Now it's time to do something else. And my body was saying, I want fish. I really want fish. And so recently I've just been eating fish, lots of fish, and been supplementing that in. So just to say, Caleb, like, who's to say that wasn't necessary for your growth? You needed to, I can tell you that, I can tell you that there's times where I've had to get away from all sorts of groups, and Freemasonry might be one of them, but there's times when I've had to step away. And so, right, a time to reap and a time to sow. So I'm just, glad you heard something that you like, brother. And I hope, it inspires you to explore the mysteries of any of these traditions, because like I've said before, we don't have we're not, providing anything that you couldn't find in your favorite, religious text. if you just take the time to study any of them, you are going to come to the same epiphanies.
You know, Adam, it's interesting you said that. Like, it completely, you know, both you and Caleb and what you just said completely ties back to the idea of rhythm, right? Like peaks and valleys. Like we have peaks and valleys in our lives, and that's essentially what I just heard you two talking about right there. Like to a T. You know, life changes. You know, it's same with me. Like when I first joined, I didn't have, you know, when I first joined the craft, I was married, didn't have any kids. So I could, you know, participate a lot. Then, you know, go to grad school, have children, and you know, that wanes. It comes back. Then the children start getting involved. You know, the kids get involved in their sports and their activities, and you know, it shifts back to that. So yeah, it's kind of that back and forth, that, you know, peaks and
It didn't help that I moved away from my home lodge like 6 months after I was raised.
Yeah.
So just getting to lodge is hard. But if you know anybody out towards Front Royal that you would have put,
Caleb, I'm very close to Front Royal, and I go there all the time. I'm in Paris, so if you
okay, I'm in Linden.
Okay, get my information from Kevin. Reach out, and if you have the, or I'll put my my email in the chat right now, and
Caleb, can you drop your email in the chat as well, please?
Yes, sir.
Sweet.
And I'll just say, to piggyback on that, is that one of the you know, when I was yeah, anyway, something that I like that kind of speaks to the same thing, Kevin, is that once upon a time we had a Tibetan you know, Buddhist that came into our lodge to give a presentation, and he told the story about the first time that his order was invited to speak at the World Council of Churches. So he gets to, so the Buddhists get there, and you know, it's very civil discourse to start with. You know, you got, you know, it's like, it starts like a joke. You know, you got an imam, a rabbi, and a priest, you know, walk into a bar, but they walk into the World Council of Churches, and so they're all you know, talking, and eventually it descends into anarchy and chaos. You know, no, my God's the best, and here's why, and so on, and so this Tibetan is just like in his little orange smock, is like sitting there just like with a grimace, you know, just like smiling and just like laughing at the whole thing. And so, not a grimace, a grin, sorry. And so they're like, why aren't you up here defending the Buddha? You know, why are you just kind of like looking at us and laughing, more or less? He says, well, to us, religion is like climbing a mountain from a different side. You know, what you see on your side, you know, you might have, you know, different birds and streams that I have on my side, which might just be a big rock face and no trees, and it might look completely different. But when we get to the top, everybody has the same view. And so religion, Masonry, it doesn't matter. If you were on this path, I don't care if you're a Jew, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whatever path you're on. If you are on a path to perfect yourself, seek enlightenment, and you don't, and I'll say one more thing, because I'm also an ordained Gnostic priest, so I'll just say it this way, is that, you know, one of the ways I like to challenge students is, you know, to ask them, do they believe in God? And I'll say, I don't. I'm an ordained priest, but I don't believe in God. I know God. I don't need to believe. Belief is something that you tell me about Santa Claus that I've never seen, and I have to believe on your word. Knowing is something I can experience. I don't have to believe my table is solid. I can touch it right now, and I know because I've experienced it. That is the G of Freemasonry. That is the G, or the gnosis. That is an experiential knowledge. I can touch something and experience it, and you can do that through Freemasonry or any of the world's religions. If you are on this path, it is inconsequential which vehicle you choose. You know, if you study Dion Fortune or Madame Blavatsky and others, there are ways that are easier for Western or Eastern minds, but they are all heading in the same direction. If you are on a path towards enlightenment, you can do it through any of them. Like if you're heading from Front Royal to Baltimore, you can get there in a Dodge or a Chevy or a BMW. It's just, each one's going to give you a slightly different experience on your way there.
As a car guy, I love that analogy.
I know, I do just for you.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Like you have church. I'll just say, like in defense, because I know where you're leading, but I'll just say that churches, like in general, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they all have like these wonderful and beautiful and rich teachings. Is it taken to to a bad place at some points? Yeah, because and so is Freemasonry perfect? No, but that's why I would implore anyone, like when I have buddies that want to join Masonry, I don't say just like, find the lodge closest to your house and join that one. I say, go to a dozen lodges, visit with each one of them, take your time, spend a couple of years doing it, at least a year. And then when you find the one where it's like family, because just like every Masonic like society, it's an adoption. You adopt us, we adopt you, and you don't want to like join into a family that, what if you get adopted by like some dudes from Front Royal you're never gonna like because you're a surfer like me and you just want to like be like on a beach. If I lived in Caleb's house, I'm never getting to go surf, right? So so I'm just saying, like, just it's I feel you, and so there's been times where I've just like bit my tongue and muddled on, but don't give up on
I didn't bite my
the
tongue.
craft. yeah, but I'm saying there's times that I did, and so but I'll tell you that as I grew up and I became more self-aware, I found my own voice, and I went to the lodges where I found like-minded individuals, and then I found, like I said before, like Christ said, why does the path but narrow is the way that leadeth unto me, right? So it's like I found my way into Masonry, but then I found these little lunatic fringe groups that like studying alchemy, Kabbalah, and these types of things. And then it was like, man, all of it's worth it because now I have found my people. I found my tribe. And
tribe within a larger tribe.
That's right. And so, but you have to, like, one thing about people, like I said, that are on a path, they'll find their way to something like Masonry, AMORC, you name it. And then within those groups, you'll, find that these, folks have, further divided, right? Solve et coagula, right? They will, divide themselves, the solve, and then later they will coagulate into these other groups. So right now we are dividing ourselves from larger society. We find the other lunatic fringe that think like we do, and then it's like, there's something satisfying about that it's like, okay, I'm not the only one that didn't accept this particular part of my heritage at face value, and I wanted to explore it deeper. So anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent. Worshipful Kevin, should we hand it back to you, since I think we're at about an hour and a half in?
Sounds good. Adam, thank you again for coming out. Brethren, thank you to everybody who showed up tonight. Let me turn my camera back on here one more time. Sorry. For any of you who might be interested, I know Al knows about this, of course. I am involved in an organization called the Mid-Atlantic Esotericon, and Adam will be one of our speakers this year. So if you're interested in hearing more about Adam, please do check that out. Our event-only tickets went on sale early this morning. So I'll try and when I send some of the stuff out after this, I'll make sure to include that. It's a non-Masonic event officially. So we're very excited to have Adam and our slate of speakers who will be speaking this year. So Adam, thank you again. Brethren, thank you to everybody who attended. We have 2 more of these next month in May, and then 1 more in June. I haven't decided if we'll continue to do this. I'll probably talk with the officers of Olive Branch to figure out if this is something we're going to keep doing as we shift back into in-person meetings. But stay tuned, and I look forward to hopefully seeing all of you out again in May. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good
Thanks,
night.
Adam. Thanks, Kevin.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. I had a wonderful time being with you.